What is the multipolar world? And why does it matter? Over the past few years, the term multipolar world has become one of the most discussed ideas in geopolitics. Politicians talk about it. Economists debate it. Rising powers such as China, India, and the BRICS nations often point to it as the future of the international system. But what exactly is a multipolar world? Does it mean the collapse of the United States? Does it mean China is replacing America as the new global superpower? Or does it mean something entirely different? In this video, we are going to explore what the multipolar world really is, how it differs from both the unipolar world that emerged after the Cold War and the bipolar world of the US-Soviet rivalry, and why many popular interpretations of this concept are often misleading. We'll examine the historical rise of the American-led international order, the emergence of new centers of economic and political power, and the evidence behind claims that the global balance of power is changing. Most importantly, we'll address one of the biggest misconceptions surrounding the multipolar world, that it automatically means America's collapse or China's replacement of the United States. As we'll see, the reality is far more complex and far more interesting. Welcome to Legendary School, where we break down the ideas, events, and forces shaping our world through educational, evidence-based analysis. Let's begin. To understand the multipolar world, we first need to understand the different ways power can be distributed internationally. Imagine the world as a system of power centers. When one country overwhelmingly dominates global affairs, we call that a unipolar system. When two rival superpowers dominate, we call it a bipolar system. And when several major powers possess significant influence and no single country can dominate all others, we call it a multipolar system. The Cold War is perhaps the most famous example of a bipolar world. From roughly 1945 to 1991, global politics revolved around two superpowers, the United States and the Soviet Union. Most international conflicts, alliances, and diplomatic decisions were shaped by competition between these two giants. Then came the collapse of the Soviet Union. Suddenly, the bipolar world disappeared. The United States became the only superpower. No country possessed a comparable military. No country exercised similar financial influence. No country maintained such a vast alliance network. This was the beginning of the unipolar moment. But history didn't stop in 1991. While the United States remained dominant, other countries continued developing. Their economies expanded. Their technologies improved. Their populations became more educated. And gradually, new centers of power began to emerge. This is the process that Jeffrey Sachs describes as the rebalancing of the world.
The European imperial age is over, the British imperial age ended in 1945, and the US imperial age is ending right now. 250 years later, the world has rebalanced. Not fully, but it sure is on its way. That's what we call geopolitics. Nothing less than the world rebalancing.
According to Sachs, this rebalancing is not an accident. It is the result of knowledge spreading across the world. Countries that once lagged behind gained access to technology, education, trade networks, and industrial capabilities. As they developed, they became increasingly capable of competing economically and politically. In other words, the rise of new powers is not necessarily the decline of old powers. It is the growth of the international system itself. One of the most important arguments in Sachs' lecture is that the world is witnessing the end of the unipolar age. Notice the wording carefully. The end of the unipolar age does not automatically mean the end of America. These are two very different claims. The strongest evidence for this shift comes from economics. Consider China. Since the late 1970s, China has experienced one of the fastest economic transformations in human history. According to the World Bank, hundreds of millions of people were lifted out of poverty. China became the world's largest manufacturing nation. Today, it dominates many critical industries including solar panels, batteries, electric vehicles, shipbuilding, and rare earth processing. Jeffrey Sachs highlighted this extraordinary growth during his lecture.
So while the United States wasn't watching, and I know they weren't watching because they're not very clever there in Washington, I have to tell you, and they don't understand much of economics at all. They weren't paying attention, but China was growing at 10% per year, thank you. And if you do that, you double the size of your economy every 7 years. And if you do that for 35 years, which China did, you've doubled 5 times. And doubling 5 times means you've grown 32 times. And if you continue beyond that, China has increased the size of its economy 40 times since 1980. 40 times. It's now a bigger economy than the United States. It's a much bigger industrial power. It is technologically more advanced than the United States in most sectors, not all, but in most sectors right now. When you drive your vehicles 10 years from now, they will be Chinese electric vehicles. And even if you happen to drive a Tesla, that's a Chinese vehicle, by the way, with Elon Musk at the top. But it's the gigafactory in Shanghai that gives it even a chance to compete.
India is also rising rapidly. It is projected to become one of the world's largest economies over the coming decades. Southeast Asia continues to attract investment. The Gulf states are expanding their influence. Africa's population and economic potential are growing significantly. Meanwhile, the BRICS group, which originally consisted of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, has expanded to include several additional members. Together, these countries represent a substantial share of the world's population and economic activity. What this suggests is not the replacement of one superpower by another. Instead, it suggests the emergence of multiple significant centers of power. That is the essence of multipolarity. At this point, many online commentators make a critical mistake. They assume that if the unipolar age is ending, then America must be collapsing. But serious geopolitical analysis requires evidence, not slogans. The reality is that the United States remains one of the most powerful countries in history. Its military spending exceeds that of any other nation. The US Navy operates globally. The dollar remains the world's primary reserve currency. American universities continue attracting talent from around the world. Its technology sector remains a leader in software, aerospace, artificial intelligence, and advanced research. Even Jeffrey Sachs acknowledges America's continuing strength.
It's not over. It's still a powerful country. It's still a dangerous country. It's got too big a military. It still has its hands on the valves of the international payment system to a large extent. It can turn on and off the spigot for countries that are vulnerable. Remember, the IMF and the World Bank are U.S. institutions, even though they are multilateral institutions. They were founded for not bad purposes, by the way, but they are American-dominated institutions, and that gives continuing power. And I always emphasize geography in thinking about economics. So the geography is that at Pennsylvania Avenue, which is where the White House is, now there's a west wing and no east wing because he knocked it down a couple weeks ago. At 16th and Pennsylvania is the White House. 15th and Pennsylvania is the Treasury Building. 17th and Pennsylvania is what's called the Executive Office of the President of the U.S. 18th in Pennsylvania is the World Bank. And 19th in Pennsylvania is the International Monetary Fund. So it's only 2 blocks from the President's office to tell the IMF what to do. You don't even need to text it. It takes 30 seconds to walk across the street to say, veto that country's program.
This is why predictions of imminent American collapse should be treated cautiously. History provides many examples of countries experiencing relative decline without experiencing absolute collapse. The British Empire lost its global dominance. Britain itself did not disappear. France lost its colonial empire. France remained an important power. Similarly, the United States may lose some of its relative dominance without losing its status as one of the world's leading nations. This distinction is essential. The multipolar world is not a story about America's collapse. It is a story about the rise of additional powers. Another common misconception is that China will simply replace the United States and become the next global hegemon. But multipolarity suggests something different. A truly multipolar world contains multiple centers of influence. The United States will be one. Russia will be one. China will be one. India will be one. The European Union will remain influential. Other regional powers will also shape outcomes. Instead of one country dominating the international system, power becomes more distributed. No single state can easily impose its preferences on everyone else. This creates a more complex world. But it also creates a world in which cooperation and negotiation become increasingly important. Jeffrey Sachs argues that we are living through a historic rebalancing of power. Whether one agrees with all of his conclusions or not, there is little doubt that the international system is changing. The unipolar moment that followed the Cold War is gradually giving way to a world with multiple centers of power. But this does not mean America is collapsing. And it does not mean China is replacing America as the sole global leader. Instead, it means the world is becoming more diverse, more interconnected, and more complex. The United States will remain a major power. China will remain a major power. India's influence will continue growing. And other regions will increasingly shape the future as well. The age of one dominant power is fading. The age of multiple power centers is emerging. And understanding that transition may be one of the most important geopolitical lessons of the 21st century. If you enjoyed this analysis, Subscribe to Legendary School, where we explore the ideas, institutions, and historical forces shaping our world through educational and documentary-style content. Thank you for watching.